Hello, everyone. Welcome to IT Hour. First one in July. It's good to be back. We're excited to be here with you all. And we've got a special last minute guest, which we will explain in a moment. We got lots going on. We've got a lot to share today since it has been a couple of weeks. Oh, hi, Ross. I got to see Ross last week at the Mac Admins Conference. So that was really fun to get to see people in person. Haven't done that in a long time. Um, and saw Charles too. I don't know if he's going to jump in and join us. And but he lives locally, and I rarely see him. Let's see who else is here. I'm going to do our greetings before we jump into things. Alan and Keith and Jonathan and Sinisa, Rob, hello. Brett, Patrick, Kelly. I saw Kelly in person as well for the first time last week. Dorothy, Debbie, Sam. Hey, Charles is here. Jacob, Brian, Nate, Dean, Ben, Artem. Oh, Jan, Josh. See, look at this. We've got a lot of people anticipating what we're going to be talking about. Nikolai, Joe, Kelly, another Kelly, and Ansh. I hope I'm saying your name right. And if I don't, then you can correct me in the chat and castigate me for doing that wrong. No, Rob, I was not saying that you got caught reaching for cookies at the table. It was like, yay, you're here, because I know some weeks you can't make it. And you always lighten things up with your banter. And we are glad to have you all here. And Dean has a Jump Cloud t-shirt on. So you're matching Chris and Chase, but not me. Sorry. So that was not a cover, Rob. Nice cover. Nope, not a cover at all. We're glad to have everyone here, and happy Friday. All right, so that's enough. We'll go into more chit chat in a bit because Chris is busy, and he's here for a special reason, and we'll get him going. So, Chris, why don't you introduce yourself and do what you need to do so then you can get on with your morning.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. Thanks a lot, Becky. Appreciate the intro. So yeah, I'm Chris Hervé, VP of Engineering here, Jump Cloud, and we have definitely had an eventful past a few hours out here in the internet, and so I wanted to just give some information there. Right, first and foremost, none of Jump Cloud systems has been affected by this whatsoever. We've been fully operational the entire time. Right. However, right, we got to pour one out for, everyone out there that's dealing with this. Right. This is definitely having a ton of impact around there. I know a bunch of folks that have been up since, 2 a.m., 1 a.m. in the morning, West Coast dealing with it. Right. And also, keeping in mind that, there are folks at CrowdStrike that are no doubt needing one poured out for them as well. Becky's going to put a link into CrowdStrike's article on it. And one of you here in the chat, I saw, realized one of the ways that Jump Cloud can help with this, right? I believe it was step 5. If you're using BitLocker, jump off a bridge, right? Knowing that, we have the BitLocker keys, if you have a lot of Windows systems affected by this, right, where you're going to need the recovery keys to get the systems into safe mode so that you can do the CrowdStrike remediation on the systems, please contact our support folks. We have a way to help you get those keys in mass so that you're not having to do it through the UI. It's going to come with some disclaimers, right? Obviously, you're going to, once you do this, have some what we'll call nuclear waste on your system because the keys will be there. So you're going to want to be sensitive using it. But at the same time, doing click ops, if you've got thousands of Windows systems, you've got to get through to get those recovery keys, just is going to be a bit insane. So like I said, contact our support folks. We're here to help you with that situation. And with that, Becky, I'm done.
All right. Well, thank you for the update. We really appreciate that. And yeah, there's been some conversations in our Slack channel about that. Tom's been posting those same instructions for people, so you can read on CrowdStrike the instructions they have there. But we've also posted some of that same stuff in the Windows Slack channel in our Slack lounge. So thank you, Chris, for the update. I know you have to run, and appreciate your time. And
Yeah.
usually Chris has fun animations and stuff to share with us, but maybe some other time we will have him on and he can do that, because it's a lot of fun when he gets a chance to show off his skills there.
Yeah, I will bring the gifts and the memes. All right. Well, I'll let
Absolutely.
y'all get back to it. And again, thanks for having me. And good to meet y'all. I'm looking forward to being here another time.
Great.
Under
Thanks,
better
Chris.
circumstances, though.
Yeah, I was going to say more.
Yes. Yeah. We'll bring you back for something more fun.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Chris. And I see Nate has posted the link to our BitLocker policy so that you can check that out, and that might give you some help there. So, all right. So back to our little bit more fun stuff, because we have to be serious on things like that, because I know a lot of people are dealing with trying to manage that. So if you can, this is your little bit of respite for a little bit of time here. Chase, are you doing anything fun this weekend?
Oh, that's a good question. No, not really. I'm volunteering early for a swim meet, so it's like that's less of a morning. So I wish I was more interesting this weekend, but unfortunately I'm not. How about yourself?
Um, Probably the same. It's just like I
Yeah.
I have to install smoke alarms this weekend, because I discovered one morning before 6 a.m. when one of them went off, and then they all went off because they're wired together. That we checked the house, everything's fine. There was nothing wrong, but when I took one of them down to check it, they are original to the house, which means they are about 17 to 18 years old. They
It's
were
quite
dated 2000. No, they're wired in. So
okay.
2006 to 2005 were the dates on them. So they are definitely more than 10 years old. And so but the new ones I got also have battery backup. So I've got some around the house that are just not wired in yet. So I'm going to spend the weekend wiring in 8 uh, smoke alarms, and
There you
that's
go.
going to be fun. James says, yeah, Costco sells 2 or 3 packs. Actually, I went to one of the hardware stores and got a contractor pack, because they will sell them in a 6-pack, and then just got 2 more. And because they're contractors packs, they come with these little covers that look like little mini shower caps. And it's really hilarious to see these little mini shower caps that go on them. So yeah, I don't know if the Costco packs would have been cheaper, but the combo of the smoke and carbon monoxide alarms are, well, it's been many years since I had to buy smoke alarms, and ooh, pricey.
But it's,
Um,
over the next 15 years. I mean,
mhm. Yeah, I know. Yeah, if you amortize it, I
yeah.
guess.
No,
But it's an initial outlay, right? But yeah, definitely need the safety, and doing the ones that are wired in and in a system, so when one goes off, they all go off, is better on my house insurance. So fun fact.
yeah.
But yeah, I've got to stand up on a ladder, and I think my ceilings are about 9 foot. So that's the fun part, is trying to reach them. So that's my fun weekend. Woohoo!
There you go. That's work cut
Yeah.
out for
Yeah. Oh, because all right. Yeah. Thumbs up. All right. So, anyway, with that, we are, we've got all kinds of little comments there. Google Nest 6-packs, good for 10 years. Yeah. These are good for about 10 years. So that's about, I think, obviously we got more life out of the other ones than I realized we were, but I think the general consensus is 10 years. All right. And with that, y'all know the drill on our usual agenda, but we've been gone for 2 weeks, and there's a lot going on everywhere. So let's look at the community, and then we'll look at product announcements because we've had quite a few of those while we were out. So in the community, we've got some questions and some scripts and everything. So lots going on. Uh, Kevin in software and hardware is asking a question about encrypted systems and exporting encryption keys. So that actually does not have an answer yet. So he could use some help there. And Arthur, Leo Arthur in security networks is asking what are the common integration challenges when implementing a hybrid cloud environment with Jump Cloud? So he's implementing a hybrid cloud environment and has questions. Actually, he's got several questions. So if you are familiar and have done that before, he would like you to answer some of his questions there. He's asking for people that have experience doing that. Let's see. Rai De Silva has a question about is CompTIA Network Plus a career-oriented certification? I found that question interesting because my kiddo is doing some CompTIA certifications in high school. And so I guess this is just, is this a good career certification to have? I know this is Network Plus is one of the kind of the starter packs, but I'd be interested to we could have a conversation right here about it, but please
Yeah.
go chime in about those. What were you going to say, Chase?
I was just going to say this is an interesting topic because I'd see it kind of more as definitely industry oriented. I know a few folks that went through it, especially on more like the networking side, that they weren't quite as familiar, right? It kind of brushes up. So it's just, add things to add to LinkedIn. It never hurts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I wonder if people find those worthwhile and whether it helps them or not, or if it's just another, like when you add it to your list of skills, like when you get several of those, if that's when it winds up helping or if that's a good stepping stone. I've seen a couple of discussions on LinkedIn, but please, there are several things on the community right now that could use some answers. And I would love it if a handful of y'all that are very chatty would take the time to go answer because y'all have a lot of great knowledge. And I know you answer a lot of stuff on Slack, but over here on the community is where things get indexed by Google and are searchable. So people can find those in search and then come back and read them later. So it doesn't get lost in Slack. Slack's a great place, but for long term storage and findability, um, it's better to answer those over on the community too, if you can. And then Chris Tate has put a new partner success interview over on MSP discussions around the partner was CCP Tech. And we've got 2 scripts as well. Now, I haven't done this reminder in a while. Remember that over in the script repo, these are unvetted and kind of use at your own judgment. Please test these on a test machine or in a test environment before you run them because they have not been reviewed by Jump Cloud or vetted by Jump Cloud. So you definitely want to use these at your own risk and definitely, just play around with them first before you try to deploy them anywhere critical. So Jurgen has taken Mac OS Labs by Joshua D. Miller and then has written how to manage and make use of that via Jump Cloud. So in my head, I say Mac OS Labs just for fun. But yeah, Mac OS Labs by Joshua D. Miller. First, you can go read up on what that is. Jurgen has a link to that. And then you can see how to take advantage of that using Jump Cloud. And then Amit Asaraf also has a script for automating Visual Studio Code extension risk assessment using extension total in Jump Cloud. So lots of great stuff there. And sorry, I think my allergies are acting up today. All right, so product. So many things going on. Not see, I think last week, Sergi put a post in the community that Jump Cloud Mobile Device Trust. Remember, he came on the show right at the end of June on 628 to talk about mobile device trust, and it is now generally available. And he did a quick post about that, giving all kinds of resources in case you need any more information. We're very excited that that is now out there, and I hope y'all have gone to take a look at that and started using it. It looks like the chat is flying by, and I'll have to come back and look at it because I'm on another page here looking at all the stuff we have. So I'll come back to that. Apple VPP applications can now be automatically updated to the latest version. I think we talked about this a while back, and everyone was waiting for this to come available. So we've added the ability to automatically keep VPP applications up to date when the latest version becomes available in the App Store. This is an opt-in feature for existing apps and will be selected as the default for new applications. So, yay! Excited about that. Also, there's an enhancement to restrict control panel access. There's a policy for that. When an admin selects completely disable the control panel setting, all other settings will automatically be hidden. This simplifies the configuration by aligning the settings. As the name of the setting indicates, completely disable the control panel when configured prevents users from accessing control panel, while the rest of the settings are intended to prevent access to specific features in control panel. And then we also have a What's New in PowerShell for July. With the two latest releases, we've introduced a new function, Get JC Scheduled User State, as well as some added readability to our Get JC System Insights function. So lots and lots of great stuff going on already in July.
Yeah, it's great to see. No slumber. Slow down here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm laughing at Jonathan about the yeah, because my eyes are just doing something weird today. It's like they're just itchy. So maybe it is maybe I did buy some radioactive isotopes, Jonathan. All right, so that's all the news for the time being. And we're going to jump into our biannual or semi-annual SME IT Trends. So this has been going on for, I think, about 3 years now.
Yeah,
And we've been doing it a couple times a year, about every 6 months or so. And we survey basically your peers, y'all. And we ask a lot of people their opinions on things going on in the industry, and get to hear about what people are thinking and what's going on. And we get some really interesting insights. And Chase is going to tell us more about that.
Yeah, it's super fun. So as Becky said, this is one of the, I'd say, more interesting pieces of information that we are able to gather throughout the year because it's a little bit more targeted. And so for this one, we did over, I think it was like 660 IT admins globally. So we look at both the US as well as the UK. And then we asked, I'd say, a lot of similar questions. We can start to see trends, and it's really interesting to see kind of like every 6 months how much that changes, as well as add in some new additions. So like we were talk a little bit more about AI. We came out with that one. And so this is the second installment where we're starting to see those trends. And so we'll start to dive into it a little bit more here, but I think it's one of the cooler things that we chat about. So let me get this loaded. And I wanted to offer a little bit more of a sneak peek. So we'll be hosting a webinar on this a little bit later, but just for community come through and see what's happening. So let me.
Yes, and I'm going to post a link to that webinar for next Wednesday.
All right, so we're going to cover, I'd say, a couple different sections here. First, we look at just general landscape. Then we go into security, kind of what is the current device mix, how MSPs are also added in some new pieces around AI as well as shadow IT. That was, I think, a little bit more interesting this go around, so we'll talk a little bit about that. One of the things that we've been keeping track of is kind of, hey, are you going through layoffs and other pieces? I would say starting certainly in our 2002 edition, I think is where we really kind of saw this ramp up and adjust. And so we're starting to see this decrease a lot over the last kind of few sections of this, which is good to see, right? And that kind of gives us saying, there's a little bit more of a baseline that we're starting to see across those types of organizations, especially from the IT lens. Well, another piece that we look at too is, some more on the macro trends of where's your budget at? And so here too, these numbers continue to increase. And so over the past year, say, hey, it's increased by 20%, 10 to 20%. You have that big bulk right there on the left-hand side. And what's interesting too is that we continue that to increase, right? Or at least relatively stay the same. These numbers have continued to increase, I'd say, over the last 2-3 installments, which is really interesting. And I think part of that too, and I'd love to hear comments from the group as well, I think we're starting to see more and more purchases that are kind of more security related purchases, or having a little bit more of that influence, and that's impacting IT's budget as well in terms of how we want to have that implemented. And so we're starting to see more and more there, and that also helps support some of what we're seeing on the security side and some of those trends as we start to dive into it. One other area that we'll look at is how many tools do you have kind of across all those different pieces? Because, hey, if budget is going up, it's typically, we are seeing prices increase as well, but that's also net new acquisition of tooling, and kind of what does that look like across people's stack and their mix of products. So we asked to say, hey, wouldn't it be nice if you had kind of one platform or kind of one area where you're able to manage all those things? And there's a lot of strong agreement here. However, when you dive into it and say, hey, how many people actually have kind of one platform that's managing, it's only 2%, right? And so the reality is you're starting to see more and more tool adoption. And I would say that 45% in the middle of 5 to 10, that's starting to decrease a little bit, and you have more adoption across some of the other areas. So we're starting to see kind of both sides. People are starting to consolidate a little bit more, but they're also continuing to have more tooling on the other side. So you're kind of starting to see this spread a little bit, which is interesting to see. So now we'll dive into security. This has been, I'd say, the hottest topic for the last 18 months, certainly, and maybe even longer, of where this continues to grow. And we ask kind of say, hey, what are your kind of biggest challenges that you've had within the first quarter? And we go through a bunch of these different areas where you can see, hey, it's kind of broken down of like by device, some of it's compliance, but really there's this large bucket category of security. And so I think that's really where spending, a lot of challenges in terms of how to think about it, how to implement it. They're certainly event-based like we've seen today. And we're also looking at security posture. And so this too is actually coming along, I'd say, more on the positive side. There's still a lot of concern around how people are thinking about their security posture, but they're starting to ease up a little bit, because we'll start to see there's different elements that have that. And a new piece that we talked about this year is shadow IT. And I think one of the elements that I'll preface this by is we're starting to see more and more shadow IT become kind of more top of mind, because it used to be, I'd say, more of a budgetary inconvenience, right? We're not sure what people are using, but we just make sure that we're somewhat safe, and we just don't want to pay for it. Now, because we're seeing so many more threat actors go through different ways, right? Especially supply chain attacks, more elements in the browser, extensions, other pieces, that having those different types of software as part of shadow IT is now a major security concern. And kind of that's where we're starting to see more of the sophisticated attacks. So this is actually bubbling up a little bit more in conversation. 35% here are very concerned, 50% are somewhat concerned. And so there's really a small group of folks that really aren't concerned about kind of shadow IT and what that looks like. Then we kind of ask, say, hey, why is it so important? Kind of, what are you doing about it? The kind of what the other side of the coin. And a lot of it comes down into, say, hey, I just don't have the visibility. I don't have the tooling. I'm not sure what's going on. But then you have this other side where it is business priorities, right? And say, hey, the business is moving too fast, or we don't have enough communication, or just have other priorities, right? There's so many other elements that go into a holistic security, I would say, approach, especially kind of implementing from the IT side as well, that we're starting to see there. And so there's a balance there. So we know it's a concern and people are trying to get to it, but sometimes the businesses are just moving too quickly and it's not top of mind. And then I would say this was one of the most optimistic stats that I found, and I was kind of like the most bullish on, and saying, hey, do we have security on staff? Yeah, actually, like 8 out of 10 organizations have a security person. So it's like, sweet, we are moving there. But then also on this other side, which I thought was really insightful, is, are you prepared for a cyber attack? And I think what's interesting here is we've kind of taken the if out of the equation. And I think more people are ready for a win type of scenario, right? So they're building up a little bit more of a war chest. They have a more of an understanding of what the impacts might be, because they're starting to see it across, multiple different, attacks. Even the more recent like car dealership one that has come into the fold. Those types of elements where people are starting to be a little bit more aware and getting more prepared for it. And then here we've asked about biometrics as well as single sign-on, and kind of some more of these areas where we're thinking about seamless access, because we want to just get a little bit more of a baseline of what's happening. And these actually numbers have stabilized a little bit. We haven't seen too much movement across the biometrics area, which is really interesting, even though we're starting to see more and more, what I'd say, like platform authenticators or biometrics just at the device level. And so as you have those device refreshes, we did anticipate that to go up a little bit, but it's actually been really stable. And then the next piece that we'll look at here is just number of passwords that we talk about, especially as we have more and more types of technologies, even JumpCloud aside, right? When we think about our own JumpCloud Go and passwordless technology, there's a lot more other passwordless and more frictionless providers out on the market than we've seen before, as well as the introduction of passkeys, right? So I think that started probably in full 9 months ago, as we're starting to see a little bit more steam, and we're having a little bit more and more adoption on the consumer side. That's starting to affect some of these numbers a little bit more. All right, so now I'm going to switch over, and then this is always kind of the spicy stat that I like to go over, and kind of what does the device mix look like? And here, some interesting adjustments. So actually, we saw that the number of Windows and a part of people's stack has increased by 3%, as well as Mac. And so the decreases here were really on the Linux side that we saw within that mix. Again, these numbers kind of adjust a little bit. That's why it's kind of +3, +4, kind of all around there. However, what's interesting is the number of decreases that we're seeing on the Mac side is so much lower. So it's just a stickier OS that we're seeing part of those organizations. So even though organizations say, hey, we're going to increase our Windows usage, we're also going to decrease a lot. It's almost similar numbers on the Mac side, but there's a lot less decreases. That's kind of why we continue to see the Mac OS piece continuing to, let's say, increase and become much more formidable, and just kind of this realization say, hey, it's going to be a mixed environment for a while, right? We're not seeing a lot of big swings in terms of more of a Windows focus, and it's going to be a lot more mixed moving forward. Another element that will kind of, so there's two other sections we want to talk about relatively quickly, and one is for the MSP and kind of how much of an influence are managed service providers in amongst kind of achieving IT goals, outcomes, other elements for the organization, and kind of how they're brought in a little bit more. And so what we look at is kind of, how present are they? And then also a little bit more of what they're doing. And so we look at kind of what extent we have and say, actually, it's everything, right? So about a third of organizations say, hey, we just outsource everything. And then we have also internal supply teams. So here we see a little bit more of a co-managed type of setting where we're offloading either help desk or some of those, or it might be security expertise that we'll bring in certain MSPs for. Again, that's starting to take more of that IT budget. And that's kind of where it goes too. So even though we're seeing a lot of increases in budget, of the folks that are working with MSPs, 70% plan to increase more, right? And that could be a conversation of, hey, there's also price increases that we see on the MSP side, or new tooling that they're adopting there, or they want just more coverage in terms of services that we're seeing. And so there's a lot more offloading happening onto managed service providers than there ever has been before. And there's some outcomes here and say, okay, well, why'd you do it? And what's interesting here is we had about 40% of folks say that's actually money saving approach for me, right? And so it might be either a reduction in services or kind of other headcount that we look at, or it's also making my existing team much more effective. And so here we're looking at, are they able to increase the type of scope of projects that we're able to get across the line, both from a security perspective, both from a productivity perspective, both from, and just overall visibility and looking at that. So that's a little bit interesting in terms of the folks that are leaning on MSPs, kind of why are they doing it and what are the types of outcomes that they have. And here too, we kind of chart a little bit more across, hey, help desk, a lot more cloud storage that we're actually starting to see. So we're seeing that offload in terms of how do we manage that? And here we think about dedicated backups. We're seeing a lot of that within the market. And then also just kind of overall system health monitoring, kind of overall updating. However, here's the silver lining. This is the other piece that we typically ask throughout this section is saying, okay, how are you feeling about them managing security? And you say, well, we do have some concerns about that. And so what this is signaling back in terms of people are willing to invest more in MSPs and understand that there's a value there. However, they're challenging a lot more in terms of truly, how are you treating our security? Okay, how are you going to get us through these compliance goals? Okay, how are you going to approach this? So there's a lot more give and take in terms of not only picking providers, but also their specialization in terms of where they want impact across the organization. So here we're starting to see it's much more concerning in terms of how they're spending that dollars. And then finally, AI, right? And I think this one is really interesting because this is the second installment where we look at the trends and kind of looking at AI and what we've seen over the past. And really, it's I would say, I don't know, more expected on my opinion, but that's just me, where I think folks are kind of coming into grips in terms of reality where, okay, the hype bubble is starting to come down a little bit and really starting to understand how certain sections of AI are to be treated. And so we actually still see that there's a lot of folks that are implementing AI initiatives and they'll be investing a lot into it. However, there's an element to say, hey, we're really going to be positive in terms of the outcome. We agree that these are things to do. And I think another positive stat that again gives me hope and optimism in the world, which I think is key for me, at least waking up on a Friday morning, but at least having an AI policy put in place. This is really a new step for a lot of organizations that haven't taken it. And even just baseline of please don't throw everything into ChatGPT, please, we'd really appreciate it type of moment. But just having a policy put in place, I think, is a really good baseline for organizations just to start thinking about how much data is being involved in that handoff, right? Because AI runs on all those different pieces. So it really depends on the organization's willingness to say, yes, this is okay to help me script out some emails and maybe some cool imagery, but also in terms of how we think about our own internal infrastructure and all those more sensitive areas of the business. And a lot of people actually think that they're moving right at the right speed, right? I think it used to be that there was kind of behind and they weren't ready for it, but now there's better pacing in terms of how we think about AI initiatives. Now on the flip side, right? And so the other hard part about that and the balancing aspect of it, hey, we really want to adopt more AI initiatives, do all the things, but it's going to go a little bit faster than we're ready to on the security side. And I think this is really where a lot of concerns are and kind of why you're starting to see those pacing numbers come back in and say, look, we agree, that's super neat. I'm team AI. However, we want to make sure we look at it from a security perspective, slow down the process and evaluation a little bit more. Truly, what are the things that it has its hooks into? There's a lot more understanding, and I would say more, again, kind of, it gives a sense of there's more discerning dollar decisions that are being made in terms of how you think about that. And then also impact on the role. And I think a lot of people say, it's really going to accelerate. AI is coming for my jobs. And I think there's these numbers where the disagreements are increasing. And you're like, okay, it's world changing, but not so much my world, right? And that's kind of becomes a little bit more of the difference in some of the nuances that organizations are going to see where it's really helpful, but it's not the end all be all. So there's going to be some elements to that. And so with that is the quick whirlwind look at kind of all the different trends and other stats that we look to. Again, we'll be hosting a more dedicated webinar. I'll be spending more time going through each one of these different nuances, but that was just kind of the sneak peek of something that we get to do every 6 months, which is super fun on our side.
Yeah, absolutely. So here, I'm going to put a little blurb and a link in the chat. So if y'all haven't registered for the webinar, it is next Wednesday at noon Eastern. So please register and join us to go a little more in depth on some of that information, a little bit more of a conversation about what all that information means and maybe how you can use that to your advantage when you're talking to your leadership about IT and what others are doing in the industry, how you can maybe leverage that to get some more resources, maybe talk about direction you should be going in your business. You talk more about security and how things are affecting you, your business, or where you should be headed to, stop things before they happen. So
yeah, that's always good. That's life easier.
Yeah, I mean, we've had conversations on here before about, or even when we were having our, like our virtual meetups around concerns about wanting to deploy a password manager or wanting to deploy something that was a little more secure, any type of product to help the business. And you might have someone higher up who, doesn't want single sign on for whatever reason, because that would be hard to deploy, or a CEO doesn't want it because they don't want to use it. So they don't want to deploy it throughout the company. And so you have someone in IT who's warning, setting up the warning signal, and it's being ignored. And it gets to be concerning. If something did happen, then even though you've made the warning, you still feel like you're at risk.
Yeah.
If something does happen, even though you've said this is going to happen at some point, and they say, "Well, you didn't tell us." Well, yeah, I did. And guess what? The person at the bottom of the rung is usually the one blamed anyway. So it can be a tough situation. So
Yeah.
maybe stuff like this can help, show the data to say, "Hey, it's not just me. There are other people out there who are talking about these things and saying the same thing, or showing how this impacts the industry or where people are headed." And
Yeah.
Jonathan's comment, "You didn't convince me hard enough." Sometimes showing how other people have been affected, how much money people have spent when they have had a breach, can be very effective. Um, Things like that.
Yeah. And I'd say too, it's an interesting baseline in terms of some of the stats too, and just say, hey, not it's one of the better looks at, say, like an industry average that we have, because the other element that this survey looks at, it's only organizations that are under kind of 2,000 folks or so, and which is, when you think about it, a vast number of companies here, especially across the US and UK and globally, that fit within that profile. And so it's a different look than, I would say, what you get from, the Foresters, Gartners, that look at just kind of enterprise best practices, which I'm sure they're great, right? But considering all the different resources and implementation styles that everyone else has. And so, like, one of the other baseline stats that we'll capture here, and I didn't cover, but is just around kind of password management in general, right? We still see kind of about 20% of organizations that just don't have a password manager, right? And so, one, don't be one of those organizations. But then two, you can use that as baseline and say, hey, look, we're actually, like, in terms of our security posture, we're pretty healthy compared to a kind of a global mix and what that looks like. And so I'd say use that to your advantage as well in terms of how you're benchmarking yourself across other folks in the industry.
Yeah, and then you can start to get into looking at, are people using secure passwords? Like, once you start managing them, then you can start going, oh, are people actually using secure passwords? Like, how easy are they to
Yeah.
break? You know? So then you start getting it, and by comparing yourself to other businesses of the same size, it's easier to show, hey, we're not looking at these $1 billion breaches here. We're looking at people. Um, it's easier to breach a smaller company because they might be more lax in their practices. And so
Yeah.
it would be much easier for a company to target a bunch of those than to try and do a big company, even though the payout would be bigger. So when you start talking about stuff like that, it might go further. It might wake them up. It might not, but
Yeah.
Dean says my boss actually used that as a reason why he didn't take my advice. Oof. I'm sorry, Dean. That's tough. Charles says cough cough multi-factor. Yeah, that can help. Just that simple thing can help a lot if you can just convince them to do that. But that's usually one of the rubs, right? It's like, that's an extra step, and I don't want to do that because I have to have something else, or it's too inconvenient. So that's where education has to come in. And that's actually the other difficult part at times is getting people to stop and listen to that education. Like, hey, I'm not just fear mongering. This is an actual real thing that puts us at risk, and here's why. And just this one little extra step, you'll get used to it. It gets easy over time, and it helps reduce the risk tremendously. So, yeah, that's true. Use bridging a small company to socially engineer access to a large company. Yeah, because that supply chain attacks, Jonathan. I mean, that's where it can really make a difference. If you are a supplier to a larger company, then you can be an entry point.
Yeah.
And Douglas says MFA keeps getting popped too, though. It's just another layer to have, not a solution unto itself. That's right. You need multiple practices, but if you've got people who are resistant, then that's just a place to start. It's not the end all be all. You have to have multiple things going to secure your practices. But if you have higher ups who are resistant, and sometimes in smaller companies that happens, right? Like they just want you to take care of it. They don't want it to necessarily affect them. You've got to educate them on, well, everybody needs to play a part. You need to not click on random links and
Yeah.
things like that. You've got to educate them on they need to do their part to make everything secure.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And not in here, but I actually just gave a talk earlier this week at an MSP summit, and one element of that is phishing, and just how much more customized it is, right? Just given, I think one of the stats was like 1,200% increase in phishing attacks since ChatGPT was released. And if you've ever played with it, you're like, yeah, that makes sense, right? That here's a 5 email sequence targeting this type of person, and oh, by the way, you can actually use it to build out the site, build out the logo, build out everything else. In order to customize though. So like there's still gonna be some people that are susceptible to it, but it's getting more intense than it ever has been.
Yeah, Brett has a good point here about
Just get by.
FI,
Yeah,
FI or PHI phishing.
exactly. Yeah, I think the Verizon breach report says there's still about 3% of folks that fall victim to it. So and then just kind
Mhm.
of use that as a baseline in terms of that's how small the chinks in the armor need to be.
So Jonathan's saying, don't the MFA pops usually require physical access or network access to a machine? And Douglas is saying, no, there's been several where the MFA service was compromised. In one I followed, it was it was the servers Google ran just downstream from the DNS that got man in the middle. So,
Mhm.
yeah. And that MFA, fatigue where you get hit a bunch of times. And if you're also trying to log in, then you don't realize which one it is. And you just get tired of it. And you're like, okay, you hit it because
Yeah,
you don't
absolutely.
realize that it's an attack.
And I think there was an article from, I think it was IT Brew, which is a great newsletter if you guys get it, around passkeys. And one of the other attacks that they did was actually mimic the same login site, but removed the passkey option. So people were forced to enter in passwords and kind of go down that route, right? So there's even that element where they're actively trying to remove some of those pieces in part of the phishing attacks.
Yeah. I'm trying to figure out how to resolve having a passkey on some things, but also trying to log into my TV because that creates an interesting conundrum using my Chromecast. And I didn't realize that was going to be so difficult until I got logged out of my Chromecast. And then I'm like, I can't use a passkey. And then it makes it really difficult to get into the Chromecast
Yeah.
because it won't give me the usual options, like, oh, go open your YouTube app. I actually can't get it to give me that option. And I was like, I'm stymied here.
I'm just waiting for the day where I just, and maybe it's like an Apple Vision Pro or something like that, where you just look at stuff, right? That's where, like, that's how lazy and secure I want to be. I just want to look at stuff and then have it unlocked, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be, I mean, because then it would be like my Face ID where I could just be like,
See, exactly.
yeah.
Things
But
about
on my TV, I'm really trying to, I'm like, how? I can't, I can't stare at it. There's no camera. So
Xbox 360.
I think I finally got in, but then it's like your account was recovered. I'm like, it was missed. I know my password, but it wouldn't give me the opportunity to enter my password. It's like, use your passkey. I'm like, it should be able to recognize the context and realize I'm trying to get in my Chromecast. I'm not on
Sorry,
a device.
no
So that
shows.
context switching is not quite there yet. So it's like, do I need to just turn off passkey? And then I'm back to not being quite as secure, right? So what do you do when you have devices that don't have that smart capability? And then you have some that do. When the service doesn't recognize the context switching. I haven't figured that out yet. And apparently they haven't either if they're going to offer it, but then have Chromecast is like, oh, enter your passkey. I'm like, I can't.
Painful.
No, enter your passkey. I cannot. If somebody out there has figured it out in the chat, please let me know because I feel kind of stupid right now. And I've got 3 different Chromecasts, but I mostly just use one of them up in my room. So I'm the only one that uses it. My kids just use the TV apps. I use the Chromecast apps because then it keeps what we're watching separate. So they don't mess up my YouTube recommendations. All right. With that, we don't have a ton of news. I didn't have a lot of time to do this because I knew we would be focused on what was going on today. But in the 2 weeks that we have been out from the IT hour, there have been multiple CISA notices. So I wanted to call those out. They put a notice out for an AT&T disclosure of a breach of customer data. So if you have not been on the CISA site, I specifically have the cybersecurity alerts and advisories. So I'm going to drop this in because I was shocked at how many came out on, let's see, July 12th through the 18th. And I didn't even have a chance to go back all the way to the last time we had an IT hour. There were a ton all of a sudden in the beginning of July. So they've been active. They added 3 known exploited vulnerabilities to the catalog related to Adobe, SolarWinds, and VMware. Oracle released a critical patch update advisory for July. Ivanti released a security update for Endpoint Manager. They released 3 industrial control systems advisories, and Cisco released security updates for multiple products. And I went and looked at that page, and there were 9 listings for Cisco. And I want to go into one in particular because this CVE was rated 10. So if you use Cisco Software Manager, in particular, it lets attackers change any user password. So I read more into this on Ars Technica. And yes, passwords for administrators can be changed too. So on Wednesday, Cisco disclosed a maximum security vulnerability that allows remote threat actors with no authentication to change the password of any user including those of administrators with accounts on Cisco Smart Software Manager on-prem devices. The Cisco Smart Software Manager on-prem resides inside the customer premises and provides a dashboard for managing licenses for all Cisco gear in use. It's used by customers who can't or don't want to manage licenses in the cloud, as is more common. In this bulletin, Cisco warns that the product contains a vulnerability that allows hackers to change any account's password. And like I said, it is a SEV 10, and the CVE is 2024-20419. This vulnerability is due to improper implementation of the password change process, the Cisco bulletin stated. An attacker could exploit this vulnerability by sending crafted HTTP requests to an affected device. A successful exploit could allow an attacker to access the web UI or API with the privileges of the compromised user. So, if you're using that in particular, I didn't comb through all of the other alerts because I didn't quite have time for that. But that one, I saw in particular, and because it was a 10, I'm like,
Spike.
yikes, please. Yeah, that's a big one. But please go check out all of those. I will have the links to those in the show notes afterward. There were even a lot more going on. There was a advisory detailing red team activity during assessment of US FCEB organization. There were 21 industrial control systems advisories. There were, let's see if it'll click over to the next page. This is all just in the first part of July. CISA and FBI released Secure by Design alert eliminating OS command injection vulnerabilities. Adobe released an update for multiple products. Citrix released update for multiple products. Microsoft did their July updates. So I don't think I've seen so many in a month on CISA's website
I think,
in a long time.
Through and everyone's gearing up.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there are 2 pages and then a few more on a third page. So, yeah, please be aware. I guess it's the summer of patching. So maybe double check all that. So Jonathan tells me in Chrome, go to Chrome, flag, search for cast, enable all, connect to all cast devices on all IP addresses. I'll see if I can figure out how to do that, Jonathan. I guess from my computer instead of my TV. So
yeah. The links we go to keep our watching recommendations.
I get logged out of them all the time, and it's then when it's on all 3 of them, it's like, oh, I just can't. Like last night, I got on this computer, I got Chrome restarted, and it locked me out of everything. Probably in part because I have so many windows and tabs open, and we've talked about me giving people heart attacks before, but apparently because they were all restarting at once and they all tried my to log back in, it somehow locked me out. And
you like DDoSed yourself. There's so many tabs.
Yeah. So not only did I have to reset my password, I then had to like log back into everything in Slack and everything. So that was a fun morning. I'm like, I wasn't on my computer at such and such time last night. How could I have gotten locked out when I wasn't even on there? And then I went, oh yeah, I kept getting that Chrome warning that it was going to restart. This is a warning to me to stop having so many tabs open, but I'm not going to. Y'all know I'm not going to. So I guess that was it. So let's see what we have here in the chat. Kelly's saying hot patch summer joke in here somewhere instead of hot girl summer. That's just more disappointing though. Hot patch summer. as the giants, Douglas is saying, as the giants get bigger and the competition dies off or gets absorbed, bought, and the ecosystem narrows and there's less and less alternatives, too many eggs in one basket, or too fat a target, or both, really. So, yeah, as things keep consolidating and they gobble each other up, then it's easier for people to target all those vulnerabilities. It boggles my mind that there are people out there that that's all they do is just ping things and look for vulnerabilities. But then again, they're looking for the bounties, I guess, that go along with those. Um, so I don't know. That would not be an enjoyable way to spend my time, but I guess some people like to do that. So I'm not going to say more power to them, because I mean, the ones that find it and let the companies know is one thing, like the white hat folks. But the ones that then go to exploit it and try to ransom things and make money off of it, those people, I'm like, mm-mm, shame on you. Shame on you. If you're having tech problems, I feel bad for you. I got 99 vendors, but 4 just got bought by Cisco. Um, and Douglas says too many don't pay bounties or too hard to actually cash in on, but you can always sell that info, and that's the imbalance in the system we use. Yes, because they can sell that info and make money and have others exploit it, and that's the problem.
Yeah,
So,
unfortunately.
mhm. And that's the problem, is that they will sell it instead of just disclosing it and letting people patch it so that um, small businesses or others don't get hurt by the vulnerabilities. Instead, they're just mercenary. And yeah, well, we are just about out of time. As a reminder, next Wednesday, come see Chase again, where he will be going into more in depth study of the IT trends. And don't forget, you can download the ebook and see lots more, and see some quotes from some people who may be on this call. I mean, they can name themselves Ross if they want to. Oh, sorry. And Ben and some others are in there too. So go check out the report. It's got some really good info in there. And you'll see lots more coming from us, going in more in depth on different parts of the report, and talking more about that very soon as well. Over the next several weeks, we'll put out more that goes into detail about it. Right?
Oh yeah, there's more to come, and too, like, there's more, say, interesting data points than just what I went over too. So again, think about where you can benchmark yourself. Think about how healthy or adjustments that it might help you with. So.
All right. And with that, Kelly's rhymes in the chat are cracking me up. You got some talent there, Kelly. You should we should just start a thread and let Kelly just go to town on those. If you're having tech problems and those patches are hot, I had 99 vendors till 7 got bought. I'm picturing Captain America. I can do this all day, is what she said. So there you go. All right. So with that, everyone, thank you for joining us. I missed y'all the last 2 weeks, even though it was nice to have a holiday. And then I spent a whole week with all kinds of admins, just like y'all, at the Mac Admins PSU conference. So that was a lot of fun. It was really great to see everybody and just geek out all week. Kind of exhausting. It's hard to keep up with y'all, but it was definitely a good time. So I was there with the Mac Admins Foundation. It was amazing. And I hope I get to do that again soon and get to see some of y'all in person. So with that, have a great weekend. Try to stay cool if you're in a hot area. It's been ridiculous here in North Carolina. We've had a ton of thunderstorms. It's been blazing, but backseat crew for life. Yes, Kelly and I were in the back seat as we drove from DC to State College, Pennsylvania. So that was quite an adventure. Thank you, everybody. Please join us next week, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.